So welcome everybody to our second Saturday's poetry reading. Those of you who don't know me, my name is Dan Kerr, and I have the privilege of being your moderator for today. If I seem a bit distracted, that's because as the moderator, I have to individually admit people to the room. So every time someone shows up, I have to admit them. So if any apologies as a result of that, if I seem a little bit distracted, because it's great to see that we keep adding people here. So let's add 3 more people here. We'll remind Mindy and Susan the advantage of starting on time. Okay, so please keep your microphone muted because that way we don't get the barking dogs and the sound of telephones and other things that JR has written poems about. So out of respect for the other poets, please keep your microphone muted. Feedback is a gift. So I have a very simple email, danielbkerr@verizon.net, not .com, .net. So if you have any suggestions, things that you like that what we did, things we could have done better, things that any feedback at all, I do review the feedback periodically with Dr. Bronson and with Kathy Donnelly, who lines up all of our wonderful poets. Planned agenda, we get started 1 or 2 minutes late, but we start roughly at 11 o'clock. We go till about 12. But depending upon how many people want, the wild card is the open read. We're very inclusive here. We give everyone an opportunity who wants to read. So we could flex a little bit, probably 12:15, 12:20, so forth, if necessary. So I'll get us all settled. I'll turn it over to Dr. Bronson. Our featured poet is Dick Westheimer. Dr. Bronson will introduce. If you want to read, put your name in the chat, and I will call upon you when we get to the open read in the order the names appear. And if we miss anyone at the end, we'll go around the group and Kathy and Dr. Bronson will watch me. And if I miss anyone, they'll let me know. Everyone who wants to read will get an opportunity to read. There are some norms or ground rules for the readings, which I'll go over shortly. I recognize that you're here for poetry, not for evangelization, but this is one of the many outreach programs of All Souls Church in Stony Brook. If you want to do a deeper dive on what we are and what we do, just go to that website there, allsoulstonybrook.org. There are 3 things I'd like to call your attention to, which our poetry community has participated in the past. We do a monthly concert series, and we happen to have this is in the church, and we have a concert tonight, the Island Chamber Brass. Those are 5 doctoral students. I think 1 or 2 of them have actually completed their PhDs at Stony Brook. So we do a concert once a month, Saturdays at 6. People always ask what time it is. That's why I say Saturdays at 6. We also do the poetry. There happens to be a picture of one of the readings which was in the church. We used to do these in the church, and then COVID came. We've been doing it virtually the last couple of years. And let's not take the time now to get into a deep discussion of the advantages and disadvantages, but we've been doing the poetry. Kathy brought the poetry to All Souls probably 5 years or so ago. In the last 2 years, we've been doing them virtually. We also do every month Native American drumming. So if you're interested in these events, just go to that website, send me an email. I'll gladly put you on our invitation list. 2 things that the poets particularly may want to be aware of and may want to participate in. Carmen Bugan and I developed something called Conversations of the Sacred a couple of years ago. And what we did here is we combined sacred readings with musical, each sacred reading, which was read by one of the poets, was followed by a musical accompaniment from either our Native American drummer, you can see him up there in the back row, or students from the university in the back row as well, or from our organist, Dan Kinney. So that has been set. It's August 5th. If you want to be part of that, several of you were, just send me an email and I'll make sure you have an opportunity to be one of the readers there. So mark your calendars for that. And also the last thing I'll mention before I turn it over to Dr. Bronson is we do a 5K run, 2K walk each year called Souls for All Souls. We're going into the 15th year now. So that the purpose of that event is 2 things. 1, it celebrates the role of all souls in the community, and you can see all the different things that we do. And also it raises funds to make the church handicapped accessible. Years ago, when Gladys Henderson was the poet laureate, she had to stop hosting it because she couldn't make it up the steps. The church is at the top of a large hill. So we do that every year. And you can see there is a group here. You'll recognize Richard and you'll recognize Kathy and Mr. Johnson and a few other people there. We have a group called the Live Poet Society that actually walks in the race. We're still waiting for a group of poets that want to run. So Richard, maybe we can put that on our goal list for next year. So mark your date for that. We'd love to see some more poets join us on October 1st. So with that, I will turn it over to Richard. Dr. Bronson, all yours. Remember to please turn on your mic.
Well, yeah, thank you so much, Dan. Maybe next year I'll speed walk. I'm not sure I'll be running. Anyway, welcome everyone. I just look forward to the second Saturday reading so much each month. It's such a pleasure this morning. And I'm hoping, I'd emailed Dan. He asked me for my opinion about when can we get back, in person. I tend to be conservative, but I'm hoping that will happen. Maybe as we approach the summer, things will ease up. And I'd be looking forward to participating again with the. Anyway, what I'm going to do this morning is I've been thinking on a musical theme for a while. I'm not sure. I'm going to read 3 short poems related to that. And then from there, go ahead and introduce Dick Westheimer. So I was very lucky. I came from a family that gave me a lot of advantages, and I'm very attuned to that these days. We probably all are, about how many people come from families that don't have those advantages. My mother believed very strongly in the music as part of one's education as a child. My first memory of music is hiding under the piano when I was about 7 years old, and the teacher yelling at me to come out, and I wanted to not leave to actually take a lesson. So these are the 3 short poems. The first is called Ode to My Piano. Old friend, we've had some good times, but now your hammer's hardened, strings corroded, pin block loose. You cannot be brought to pitch. You need your parts replaced, yet I am fearful you'll return a changed instrument. New felts on your hammer, strings restrung. Will I know your voice? I've caressed your keys, the ivories and ebonies, have felt the 9-fold laminate of your curved body, strings on forged iron. Agent of resurrection, you have helped decipher messages, encrypted in mute lines and dots, brought to life souls of vanished men. Transcender of time and space, sanding to the hammer blows, my action yours. Unlock your energy, sing out chords that resonate with the human heart. That's the first. The second is titled Opus 27, number 2. I read through the music past midnight, when nocturnes should be played, as Chopin had done in Parisian soirees, night after night, eyes closed, fingers flying over the keys, their heroic rush up 2 octaves, then crashing down to the A flat below middle C, the notes then fading away, measure by measure, to a resolution of his agony, success while dying of tuberculosis. It ate at him slowly. I stood up, closed the keyboard. The last, I'm switching to a violin. My dad played violin. To his violin for William Bronson, MD. I found you abandoned in the attic of my boyhood home, your broken bridge, rusting strings, a testimony to disregard. When had you last sung? And what year did he last hold you in his loving hands? Can you sing me a song of my lost father? Of the times you had, the long dead maestro, you, his prima donna. When did he last place you in your case, where you have waited in aging velvet until gently lifted from that grave resting place, and I stroked your strings? If I were to raise your frayed bow, touch so lightly those springs, would you whisper why you lost interest, left you longing in your case? What was his new love that led to this estrangement? What ruled him that nothing else mattered? His music, his family. Sing me a song of my lost father. The times you had together. Tell me of his passion. Whisper his secrets that I may understand. Those are the 3 poems. Yeah, it was a lesson for me. Thank you. the question, what one's life, one's medical life versus family life, and how do you divide that? How does it happen? And it's been a warning to me. So anyway, I'm going to move on now, of course, and introduce our guest poet today. It gives me really great pleasure to introduce Dick Westheimer. He has, with his wife and writing companion Debbie, have lived in rural Southwest Ohio for over 40 years. They raised 5 kids there. He enjoys picking bluegrass music with his neighbors and running and walking the trails of nearby farms. Sounds wonderful, Dick. His most recent poems appeared in major journals, Rattle, Patterson Review, et cetera, really strong journals. His chapbook, A Sword in Both Hands, a collection of poems prompted by Russia's war in Ukraine, is published by Sheila Gig. I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Sheila Gig Editions. And I welcome him to the Zoom podium, at All Souls, and look forward to his reading. Thanks so much for joining us today, Dick.
Well, thanks so much, Richard. And I also wanted to thank JR for introducing me to Kathy, who introduced me to Daniel. So I'm appreciative of them all. And I'm looking forward to the open mic. And if I were on Long Island, I would run in your 5K rather than walk. I'd be running. So I am going to read from my chapbook. But first, I'm going to read a most recent Rattle poem, just because it's a lovely way it's a gentle poem to start off the day. And if you can imagine the picture from the Artemis spacecraft as it was rounding the moon, and it had a giant crescent moon, and in the background, a little tiny crescent Earth. It's called The Nearly New Moon and the Crescent Earth. I asked Google if gravity is a particle or a wave. Instead of responding, it shows me a photo of the crescent Earth seen from beyond the moon, then asks me if I am happy, if I am more moon than Earth, and I think moon. Definitely I am moon today, 250,000 miles from any of my brood, which is not much farther than I normally feel from here in Ohio, and them living in their warm homes, one with a cat sleeping at his feet, another snugged under blankets with her lover, watching the snow fall out their frosted window, a third tucking her loose-toothed boy in bed before catching up on her work. Their mother is paying bills in the other room, and I am drawn to all of them, like the moon is to the earth, so far away, each of us one from the other. But our orbits remain stable, and Google was right. We are drawn by neither particle nor wave, but by some strong force not subject to the laws of physics. This is what I imagine the moon feels, looking back at the blue jewel it was born from. And Earth, too, is constantly tugged by the orb in its orbit, as each is held so warmly by the other. Thank you. So by introduction to my book, it's called A Sword in Both Hands. And the title, I will read the title poem first. And all of the proceeds of the book, the poems in the book are all responding to Russia's war on Ukraine. And I had hoped when the book came out that it would seem like a distant past memory, but everything in the book is much more intensified now, even though we don't see it as much. All the proceeds from the book go to support an organization called Ukraine Trust Chain, and we'll share the links with them. They fund volunteer teams in Ukraine to deliver medicine. They winterize homes, they run shelters, they evacuate people in danger. It's all volunteer, all the money goes to logistics. And I have a friend who is Ukrainian, who I've made since the beginning of the war, this is the one organization that she supports. One other thing about Ukrainians, the cover art is a Ukrainian artist who lives in Kyiv. And so a certain amount of proceeds from the book have gone to support her and her art. As she struggles through. And she has some great stuff on Facebook of doing art by candlelight. So the first poem, could you show the first slide, Daniel? So this first picture is not of the Ukraine war. This is Afghan refugees on the border of Poland. Could you show the second slide? This is Ukrainian refugees on the border of Poland. And while the tenor of the book is not in any way critical of Ukrainians or American policy towards Ukraine, the title poem, I want to situate that this is the way that we should treat refugees, in my opinion. It's called A Sword in Both Hands. And the epigraph is, and you can take the slide down, one is misled when one looks at the sails and majesty of tall ships instead of their cargo. And that's Dion Brand, who's a wonderful poet. The poem, A Sword in Both Hands. We are a camera photographing itself, America. We are the majesty of tall ships, and we are the cargo, America. We are the jeweled sword, and we are the slain. We raise the blade and knight the brave in Ukraine, America. We bless them with crowns and say, they look like America, America. We arm them with garlands. We arm them with garlands of dragging, slaying missiles and javelins of the finest steel. We bear our sword arm, America, and we intone our money prayers. We strip the evil enemy of coin and commerce. We are money gods, America, and we do this with the right hand, America. With the left, we hold a pocked sword notched with brown bodies, America. We place the sword in the hands of bone saw kings who do not look like America, America, to slay those who the camera cannot see. Because we say, America, that brown and far away are not America. Those who have before them other gods than America are not America. Their brave cannot be knighted by our jeweled blades, because only those we say are America, America. The camera that can only photograph itself is a mirror that only sees itself, is a sword that only slays itself, America. Thank you. If you could put up the next slide, a little trigger warning. There are dead bodies in this, so look away. But war has dead bodies. And this picture was taken early in the war by a photojournalist her name is Lindsay Addario. And hearing an interview with her and how taking this picture changed her life. And she cried during the interview. This is an experienced photojournalist. And this poem was written really about her and me and you, and as much as these beautiful people whose lives were lost. And you can take it down. The half-life of portraits of war. The witness, that would be Lindsay Addario, the witness displayed her portrait of woe. I bit my lip, my face wrenched tight, my rage unmasked. I kicked the cat. The cat, a victim of war, does not know about the towhead child in the pink puffy coat, about her big brother in blue, his little backpack askew. The cat cowers as I walk by, but soon he forgets and nuzzles his blunt nose on my leg. How soon will I forget the towhead child, her bloodied mother, the brother and friend, his roller suitcase, the dead. The witness will not forget. The soldier who tried to protect will not forget. The shooter will not forget. Only the cat and Putin and I will forget. Thank you. This next one, if you could put up the next slide briefly. Again, all of these are from the beginning of war. And I just saw this photograph. It's not a person. Well, they're dead people, long dead people. And every morning, this grave digger would go through the graveyard and try and see if there was any unexploded ordnance, because he had to do his job, bury a lot of dead. And this poem sort of speaks to how in Ukraine right now, most everybody is enlisted in the war effort, and this poem envisions even those who have been buried, long dead do. It's called A Long Rest Interrupted, and you can take down the slide. Thank you. A long rest interrupted. The enemy bombs did not disturb our ancient dead. They had already left their graves, gone to join the resistance, gone to stand with their brothers and sisters at the barricades and bedsides of war. We will wait to count our fallen. Now we recite matins to the living and number those enemy child warriors. We return to their mothers. At dusk, we pray for the day we can turn battle tanks into tractors, see our slain become soil for sunflowers, and our ancient dead will get to return to their rest. So this next picture is of Volodymyr Zelensky, and it's hard not to see the pain in his face. This was upon him showing up at Bucha after it had been liberated and seeing the tortured remains of his countrymen and women, and seeing the mass graves, and seeing that, yes, indeed, there was a brutality that even the Ukrainians could not believe. And this poem, thanks for the picture. This poem is written after the story of Lot, his wife, and daughters, after they had left Sodom and Gomorrah. And it's called Witness, the Warring Lords, and the Forever Price. In the beginning, it was Lot and his daughters, his unnamed wife, those damnable angels, Sodom, Gomorrah, Berka, Irpin, all the same, slaughter, panic, outrage, shame. This is the stuff of endless lists, the kind and number of disjointed bones, the chromatone of burning flesh, the breadth and width of skin as measured in pain, kid skin knees, not kissed, scabs unpicked, toys crushed, the unnamed babies who will never go to war, the named ones who will. I rip that page from my battled Bible. Overhead, a lone goose sounds like two. Call, response, call, response. So alone. I look back to the remains of the terrible book. There, the limitless victims and the nameless wife who I shall call Sela. Her life as witness as she considers. Her immolate sisters. That lone goose, the good, the vagrant, the lascivious and chaste. Her gaze stays fixed on the crime, forever tied to the chasmed sky. She sees the hands that reach from the graves, the broken crutches, how blue the fire burns, how blackened the flesh, the dirt beneath the fingernails of the dead, the sins that are not sins, the sins that are, the gods who worship their own idols, the idols made in the image of their savage gods. Only Sela looks back. She knows the price. She chooses to be a pillar of salt. She chooses to be a pillar of salt. Thank you. I'm looking at time here, and I've spent a little bit more time explaining poems than reading them. So I'm actually going to skip the next two for the time being. We'll see if there's time at the end. But right here, I just want to tell the story. So if you could put that picture back up. This is a picture of a woman. I can't pronounce her last name. Her name is Vanda. She during the Holocaust, during the World War II, hid in a basement in Kharkiv with her father when the Nazis invaded, and remembered it very well. And then she hid in a basement in Kharkiv 80 years later, and died, hiding from another type of fascists. And the poem is published. I can share a link of it later, but it's her story. And the next slide, I just love this picture. And I wrote a poem imagining her story. She was a refugee on a crowded train, and she brought her cat, and she brought a picture of her husband, all in these, plastic grocery bags. That's all she took with her, were her cats and the picture of her husband. So I have a poem about that in the book. You know where you can get it. We'll share the link. And let me, there we go. Okay. So the next poem, and that's it for the slides for now. This next poem is my most recent poem. Like many of my poems, it responded to a news article, and this was about the probe around Jupiter lost its memory. And it was just recovered, and the images from it were just recently returned to Earth. And it's called Memory Restored. I pull the old scope from the back of the barn, where it's nested in its box since I was a boy. Jupiter's called to me all winter bright as a lighthouse beacon, a god touring stations along the ecliptic. On nights when the clouds part, it's drawn me out, reminded me of the cold, dark days of high school, when I would go lonesome to open fields with my kit-made scope and count the Galilean moons that hung onto the great giant's apron strings. Even then, they seemed like children on a grand adventure, one I'd join if I could. So tonight, with that scope dusted off and aligned, I turned it again to the zenith, my memory restored, the gift of solitude recalled, the sky an incantation. We are all Galileo on nights like this, seeing ourselves reflected in the stars. Thank you. And I think I see Rosemary on here. I actually wrote that poem in a workshop with her on Thursday. This next one, it just occurred to me that I should read a poem that I wrote a couple weeks ago that you all might relate to. It's After the Lies Told by George Santos, of all things, which I related to particularly well as somebody who is a Jew, but rarely claims it in so many ways, as opposed to him. Anyway, it's called Identity Crisis. The coyotes howl tonight as if the world belongs to them. We humans do the same, but instead of howling, we name. Like when a white man says he's black, or a Catholic claims he's a Jew. Or what about me on Fridays at sunset, intoning blessings to a God that for me does not exist, in a language I don't understand. Even the wind whistles its name some nights when I'm in bed, makes me anxious for a storm that may never come. It's like a hope indistinguishable from a horror, like a storm breaking a branch. Then there's pruning, which causes a branch to bud, the flower to fruit, and then the fruit to be eaten by you and me, thus marking us eaters of fruit. So that's it, to be known by our deeds, not by our names, to be fruit if we've flowered, flower if we've been bud, bud if our branches were snapped by the wind or pruned by the blade of a sharpened shears. We are apple or pear or Jew or human, only by way of these. Do I have time for one more poem, Daniel? Is that a thumbs up? I couldn't read your lips.
Yes, yeah, we can go another one.
Okay.
Go another
So-
two, another 5 or 6 minutes or so will be fine, Dick.
Okay, good. Well, then I am going to read another news poem. You might know that there is a new NFT salesperson out there selling his trading cards. And he came out with, he said, I have a big announcement to make. And it was selling NFT trading cards. His name is Donald Trump, in case you forgot. And this is called I Have a Big Announcement to Make. I am releasing a deck of virtually worthless cards of me doing what a poet does. Here's one of me lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling, obsessing about an opening line. Here I am wadding up a piece of paper, on it a 7th draft. Here I am standing over the stove, sauteing onions. Their smell stirs the hidden Proust in me. Oh, and this one, when I look like a nose-slapped dog, my fourth journal rejection today. Tonight in bed, my wife asks to read this poem, says I left some things out. Poppy me singing the Tooth Fairy song to our grandson. Baker me pulling a perfectly brown braided loaf from the oven. Superhero me laying with her on a sunny afternoon. Me being the largest part of her seeing stars. And I'll read one more and leave you with, let's see. I might save this other love poem for the encore. This one is called Perhaps Prayer is Thinly Scattered Matter. Again, space theme, news theme. Voyager spacecraft was left the solar system, and there's a definition of what constitutes deep space as opposed to our solar system. Voyager detected a constant hum as it exited the solar system deep in the cosmos, which nobody expected. And if you remember Voyager, you might remember Voyager took off in 1976. So we're still getting signals back from a spacecraft that was built on 70s technology that is now billions of miles from here in deep space. Perhaps prayer is thinly scattered matter. I hear the hum Voyager hears as a chorus of chimes, a thrum, a rising and falling quiet. Ions close enough to sing to one another, too far apart to feel the fall into each other's orbit. I imagine each in unison recites the same poem, chants the same aum, holds me like a jewel suspended among them. If I compose myself, I can, sitting earthbound, hear that aum, or at least for a moment. I dimly grasp what believers mean when they speak of God, when beseeching their eyes look skyward, or when they sway to prayer in a language my ancestors knew, or when grace showers upon them like interstellar dust. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dick. That was
I
truly
really
wonderful.
look forward to hearing the open mic and reading a poem at the end.
Truly, truly beautiful, moving reading, starting with the view from space, and that were, the analogy in terms of the moon being drawn to Earth and all of us, the sword in both hands, and that imagery between the ship and the cargo was just something really, really very powerful. And the poor cat who got kicked in the, and you talked about the picture there reminded me of that famous scene from Vietnam when you've got the girl running who's just been the victim of a napalm attack. It's amazing how history just unfortunately repeats itself. The long rest interrupted, the child warriors returning to their mother, again, very, very moving, and the witness to the warring lords, and the image of the burning flesh and the disjointed bones, just very, very powerful. And there were the Jupiter probe, how we're all Galileo, that was just beautiful, and the coyotes yelping, and And the one of Donald Trump with regardless of your political affiliation with his trading cards was just something. And I couldn't help, Dick. I know we have a mutual interest in space, the Voyager, and the first Star Trek movie where Voyager is. So, just a beautiful, memorable reading. I'm sure people are really going to appreciate the recording we're going to send out.
Oh, thank you so much. And before I sign off of this part, if you don't want the book, but still have $12.80, send it to Ukraine Trust Chain. That's that's the deliverable. If you buy the book, they'll still get a portion of the dollars, my portion of the dollars. But I encourage you to support them. And if you want more of these poems, not all of them as heavy as the ones I read there in the chat.
Well, thank you. Let's get to the right spot here. Okay, so the open read, we've got a very large group of open readers today, which is great. So I think we're probably going to end up going a little past 12. I hope that's okay with people. And we have a lot of new people as well. So ground rules, we've got probably 15 names or so in chat. Everyone who put their name in chat will be called upon. Anyone who didn't put their name in will give you an opportunity to read. Please, strong, only one poem, and no more than 5 minutes for the poem. Until you're called upon, please keep your microphone muted. Please wait to be called upon, and I'll call the readers in groups of 3, so you'll have time to be prepared, so you won't be surprised. So, if you need to go out for a second to get something to drink or make a pit stop, we'll call people in rounds of 3, and then poet Richard will come back at the end to close the program. We will bring Dick back for an encore. So without further ado, the first 3 people that we have, and remember when it's your time to read, you have to turn on your mic. So please be prepared to turn on your mic. And so we've got the first group of 3 is Don Billings, Vicky, and Marvin. So Don, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dan. This is a short poem. I was actually going to do something else, but since Dick did his reading of the Ukraine poems, I'd like to put one in myself so he could hear it. Did you hear of the training exercise? You can see it on the nightly news. Have you seen the trenches with the bodies in black bags, homes, hospitals, schools, pounded to rubble by artillery? Have you heard about the millions fleeing the training exercise? The men stayed back to fight for the training exercise. Stopped, Russians practiced a retreat, left booby traps and mines. Civilians left dead, shot in the head, hands tied behind their back. It was all part of the training exercise. I feel I'm dying in Mariupol. I feel the destruction around me. Will I soon lie in a pit somewhere? I see the mass graves. I smell the smoke of burning buildings. I hear the crying of the living stooped over a child's body. Will the world remember us who were once living in Mariupol? Will the world remember the evil that came to our country in February 2022? I'm consumed by never-ending grief, crushed by raw power and greed. I feel I'm dying in Mariupol. You could put up on the screen how we can reach the Ukraine Trust and how we can get our book. That would be helpful.
You have a slide for that we'll show at the end.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Don. Very moving. Vicky, over to you.
Are you saying Victoria or Vicky? I can't hear you, Dan.
We've got a Vicky and we've got a Victoria. So if
Yeah.
you want to, so
I'm
you're
Victoria. So
all right. So Victoria, why don't you, Vicky, are you there? Okay, Victoria, then I'm going to go to you.
okay. Let's see. This is called Tumbleweeds, 1973. Route 66 seems to stretch west to the apocalypse, east to the Big Bang. On this old rattling Greyhound bus, torn green seats, dirty windows, I'm just as easily here as there, pulling on a rope gone slack, looking for wisdom in the pages of the electric Kool-Aid acid test. Too many hours out of the LA bus depot, heading back to New York, away from failure. We roll across the dry tongue of New Mexico, the driver listening to rockabilly on his radio. A young guy with a tattoo and an angry smile sits behind me. In front, a tough-skinned old man with the eyes of a king, the noble curving nose of an ancient Mayan. We go a long while under the anemic sky until the bus pulls over with a hot, weary sigh at a place not found on a map. The old man exits, walks toward distant gray-brown hills, getting smaller and smaller, wading into a rippling mirage of heat vapor until he becomes transparent, swallowed up by nowhere, it seems, both of us on our way back home.
Well done. I mean, what's the shame Tom Wolf's not alive. I'm sure he'd enjoy that poem. So, Marvin, over to you. Marvin, you got to turn on your mic. Give Marvin a second.
Yes, Primo Levi was a chemist living in Turin, Italy. Because he was Jewish, he was sent to Auschwitz. Eventually, he was freed by the Russians, returned to his home in Turin, started to write about his experience, such works, If This Be a Man, and the periodic tables and others. Years later, he supposedly committed suicide by leaping to his death from a balcony in his home. Possibly it wasn't suicide. This poem is called The Fall. Do we kill the dead twice when we buy what we read about Primo Levi jumping to his death from the 4th floor of his building in Turin, plunging to the ground, smashing his skull on the Sabbath, prompted by nightmares which haunted his days, thrusting 174-517 over the railing, spiraling past Auschwitz, past bones and ash, where Russians pulled his skeleton to a safety that was never safe. A truce not encompassing enough to reign in guilt of being here, to see the olive trees and know the smell of butter bread. There was no note. The banister not high as barbed wire. He could have fallen dizzy from painkillers while waiting for his wife, married to depression, never divorced from bearing witness, whose work seemed to make him free enough to write about our falling. But did the shade eclipse the lustrous praise and cause the end, or did he simply fall with us?
Beautiful, Marvin. Thank you so much. And we're reminded all the people recently in Russia who fell off balconies as well. So thank you for that. Okay, next group of 3, we have James Horn from North Carolina, we have Vinny, and we have Chuck. So James, over to you.
Yeah, here I am. Let's see, I'm on the Santos kick with you guys, right? Okay, let me get over here now. Santos on a drug binge had been using a syringe, causing us to cringe. Santos still livid. They say he has COVID. Losing would flip lid. Had mind badly soiled. Santos is like eggs hard boiled, a child who was spoiled. When Santos occurred, as usual, reassured, trouble up had stirred. Santos much bad news. Peruse when he would abuse, suffering a big bruise. And the picture Santos paints, members going to All Saints, following restraints. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Certainly very timely. Vinny, over to you.
Okay, very funny. This is actually a reflection on the nearly new moon and the crescent Earth that Dick started with. It was the prompt number 2 in the most writing prompts. It's called False Echoes. We used to have this dream. We were flying across the ceiling, a myriad of patterns all at once. We could change and morph them in our minds. Colors, sequence, galaxies born and died. We close our eyes and now all we see is blackness, silence and space. Gone is the kaleidoscope magic dancing in front of our preteen eyes. We would reach out, touch them, swirl them around before the next set of images would enter our minds. Our imagination somehow now tangible. Till this day, we can't explain how or why, as children, we had this gift of strange visions. We'd be amused for hours. How is this possible? Until one day they were just gone. We tried and tried, unfocused our eyes, and stared at the spotted ceiling, but the gift was gone. Now we're grounded, but still look up. Look to the canopy of the evening sky, in amazement, here on this big blue jewel. Are we just fools? Looking at your face, pale and pockmarked, floating out in space, the same moon, the same glow, holds us fast, brings us present with false echoes of the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Vinny. Beautiful. I'm gonna think of that poem when next time I look at the moon. Back over to you.
Yeah, my name is Chuck Stringer, and I live in Union, Kentucky, Northern Kentucky. And I'm grateful to have called Dick friend for the last 10 years, writing alongside him in Cincinnati-based writing programs. And I too would like to read a poem to acknowledge the pain and suffering, the heroism of the Ukrainian people. This poem is the Cento, 18 lines taken and newly arranged from poems by Pablo Neruda. And it's called Vladimir. He trained himself like a long lance. He made himself menace like a somber god, dispenser of this blood. I see the ancient being, the slave, the sleeping one, his mouth agape like a dark scar in that history of torments. I came by other ways, through streets, river by river, city by city, one bed after another, to touch those sleeping faces. Love, love until the night collapses, the days of unraveled light. All the way to death, they did not understand. They were lit and burned, smoke of the ritual lamps. Nothing was left but bones. Led to a warrior's bed by murky blood. Tell me how he slept when alive. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you joined us, and thank you for that very moving poem. Okay, the next group of 3 is Megan, followed by Maggie, followed by Dan Kerr. So Megan, over to you.
Thank you. This is called Glass. We stepped into a studio with long tables, air warmed by creativity. We explored one of many methods making glass. Dongs, gloves, and goggles held metal rods with molten glass on the ends. We pulled and twisted the rods to form long glass canes that could be heated to birth new objects. They would retain the color we chose, the texture we created. How beautiful and terrifying to live in a world where we contain the potential to melt ourselves and reform, or to stay as we are. To live in a world which we sculpt and which shapes us, where sand can become a plate, where hope can grow in the crevices of fear. To live in a world where we can create gratitude in the furnaces of our mind from the minerals of our surroundings. To live in a world full of windows that conceal and reveal. In a world where we build limits and we possess the power to shatter those limits. where something that is designed to protect also cuts, where we can control so much and so little, in a world where we can choose to clamp our hearts to a prism and always find the rainbow, in a world where where the art we create and the art we all are can both confine and liberate, in a world that, like its inhabitants, is fragile and indestructible. Thanks.
Thank you. Beautifully, beautiful day. Air warmed by creativity is something we could all benefit from. So thank you for that. Okay. Maggie, over to you.
Thank you. What a gorgeous afternoon. Dick, that was just wonderful. This poem is called Accoutrements for Power for Zelensky. Hitler wore his field gray, his swastika. Stalin attired in a tunic, Lenin a flat hat. Khrushchev wore a chapeau and traditional Ukrainian shirts. Mussolini garbed up in black shirt and fez. Churchill sported a Homburg and cigar. MacArthur fought without a helmet. Martin Luther King rocked every suit. Mother Teresa's blue stripes framed her simple sari. This guy wears an olive green t-shirt and a steadfast gaze. He just might save the planet.
Thank you, Maggie. Very moving, very beautiful. Okay, next poet is Dan Kerr, and I'm going to read from the Suffolk County Poetry Review 2018 version. And as I read this poem, I'm mindful of the contribution not only to the poetry community of Gladys Henderson, but also Robert Savino, both of which coached me and encouraged me to write poetry for the first time. And this was the first poem I ever wrote that was published. And it's called Sitting by the Fire with Pop. And if I shed a tear, it's because it's my dad's birthday today. Here goes. Sitting by the fire with Pop. When I was a child, Pop and I often sat together in front of the fireplace, talking and watching TV. I think he thought of himself as Ben Cartwright as we watched Bonanza by the Fire on his own Ponderosa in Ashoroken, Long Island. As the flames crackled, we experienced the Cuban Missile Crisis, buried JFK, met the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, watched Mickey Mantle's walk-off home run in the 1964 World Series, witnessed the siege of Khe-Sanh, and listened to the Apollo 8 astronauts read Genesis from the moon on Christmas Eve. As the wood crackled and burned, Pop shared stories and taught me about life and about death. Every New Year's Eve, as we waited for the ball to drop at the time of my birth, I was born just before midnight on December 31st, Pop would ask me 2 questions. What did you learn this year? And do you feel any older? Somewhere between the My Lai massacre and Watergate, the tenor of our conversations changed. Although I still made him a fire every night, our dialogue grew more pointed as the length of my hair approached my waist. You used to be such a cute little kid. Whatever happened to you? If your hair gets any longer, I'm going to put a broom up your ass and use you as a mop. As the world began to unravel, Pop sought solace and comfort in alcohol. Although he still appreciated the fire I made each night, it seemed the only war between us came from the flames in the fireplace. Once he said to me, the nicest thing about me moving to Florida is that I will only have to see you once more, but I'll be dead at my funeral, and at least I won't have to look at you. One night, after too many scotch and sodas, Pop fell asleep in his chair in front of the fire. When Mom came to get him up, he stumbled a few feet and fell on his head. As Mom held him in her arms, and blood flowed from a long rug burn on his forehead, Mom cried out, "Your father was a great man. You should never have to have seen him like this." As I look back on that low point, I'm always grateful for what I said. Mom, he'll always be a great man. He's just going through a tough time right now. With Mom's help, Pop rose from the floor, and I never saw him like that again. And after he and Mom moved to Florida, we grew closer every year. One day I sat across him at a Miami hospital room after one of his legs was amputated. He looked at me with a tear of joy in his eye and said, "Who would have ever thought we would have been this close again?" With the passage of time, I've learned that the novelist Pat Conroy was right. In families, there are no crimes beyond forgiveness. Every time I light a fire, I feel the love of my father in the flames. And remember all those things he taught me sitting in front of the fireplace. Thank you. Okay. Joan, over to you. Joan Leota, you got to turn your
I'm
mic
trying
on.
to unmute. It's Leota. I'm trying to unmute there.
You are unmuted and we're all set for you.
Thank you. This is my first time attending and I'm really happy. I was able to hear all of this wonderful poetry. And I'm going to read a poem on aging because this was my birthday week and I just turned 75 on Tuesday. So here's a poem and it relates to the flowers my husband bought me last year. And it's in my new book, Feathers on Stone. I'd like to age like this year's gift of birthday roses, now past their expected prime, but still beautiful. Bouquets from previous years have withered, died after a week, but these continue, walking in beauty as if they each day salute sunrise with their own pollen. A few have browned at the edges of their orange-yellow, splendorous petals. Leaves have browned and crackle like paper, but the roses themselves are not only lovely, but also now exude an aroma strong enough to pulse through the dining room into the kitchen, wrapping me in their heady scent of love remembered each time I sit down for my morning coffee. It seems to me that scent, so rare in purchased hothouse roses, is even stronger now than when the roses first came home with my husband's grin. Each time I stroke a still soft petal, I think again how I want to age like these roses, velvet and strong, exuding the aroma of love, even in old age. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. That was beautiful. And we're so glad that you joined us. We hope you'll join us again. Okay. Next two, I think in my emotion, the last one, I forgot to announce the next couple. So it's Rose followed by JR. So Rose, over to you. Rose, I think your mic is on.
I'm now available. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, wonderful. Now, I was going to flog my new book, but I won't. I'm going to read the poem I wrote in the workshop with Dick yesterday. We were talking about the planets and space. Pardon. My father's sky. My hand disappeared in his. Our boots swished on the snow already hardened by many steps. This is the Milky Way, he said, and pointed at a giant river of twinkling lights that looked nothing like milk. Oh, and over there, that W is Cassiopeia. I knew the Big Dipper, of course, and father let me find Orion. A belt woven from starlight. Draw a line through the belt towards the left, he said. See that bright star? That's Sirius, the dog star. No dogs on Sirius. It's part of the Canis Major constellation. That means greater dog in Latin. How disappointing. I had imagined all dogs coming to us from Sirius, beings from space. The sky began to fall into some kind of order. A glittering glory of twinkles and tinkles I would remember forever. And my small cold hand being warmed in my father's big one. Big cities let me forget my father's sky. Sometimes even the moon was hidden by buildings that seemed to loom dark, towering, and unforgiving. The city lights made me forget the grandeur of a world beyond the mysteries of space. There always was, of course, at the latest on the internet, TV and assorted means of communication. A little machine on Mars and pictures from a desert that once held some of life, perhaps. Bradbury's Martian Chronicles awakened a longing. Heinlein's red planet convinced me of the reality of my dreams. One day, after I had held my grandchildren's hand and showed them Orion, Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper, and Sirius, the only ones I recognized, we found home in our small piece of earth in the middle of nowhere on the Castilian plateau. A warm night caressed me as I sat on the pretend plastic boulder that looked like stone. Something dishonest somebody had thought up to house the gear that made our pool work. I heard the bulls low across the quiet night and dreaming fields. From the pond came the occasional splash. A night bird called its mate. The walnut tree bombarded the wooden bench below it. And I looked for Orion towards the horizon, setting my eyes too far away to find the Milky Way, looking behind me to the left for Cassiopeia, and whispered, "Dogs on Sirius," to my father, who had, softer than any feather, taken my warm hand in his cold one.
Beautiful. Thanks, Rosemary, sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Okay, JR, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dick. That was wonderful. Great day, man. I'm loving this already. I moderate the Farmingdale Creative Writing Group, and I give a theme every week. And members contribute words or phrases and whatnot. So this is, and I write the poem on Tuesday. So this is Tuesday's poem, and there were 20 poets who contributed words or phrases, and I'm delighted to see a number of them are here. So freshness guaranteed. My summer garden provides pleasure from tilling, toiling, amending, planting, pruning, finally harvesting freshness. Farm stands roadside are an alternative. Produce markets good. Grocery stores land at the bottom of the fresh barrel. Hard to compete with cherry tomatoes popped from the vine into waiting mouths. Nothing compares to fresh picked. Laundry, backyard, breeze dried and folded in slow inhales, fresh mown grass with a billion blades hemorrhaging a bouquet of green nectar, competing with clipped onion grass and rose petals avalanching from floribunda stems to mingle with garden memory scents of hyacinths and stargazer lilies. I add fresh ink to a fresh journal page, chasing, netting, capturing, fluttering ideas, blooming across benches, fresh ideas lined to versify, inspiring me to look with fresh eyes, search out hidden gems, slash out fresh yarns spun from the mouths of liars, admonish fresh kids to go to their rooms, absorb newness to remake me daisy scented, ready to face a fresh start each new day. This new year brings fresh snow, air crisp as kettle chips to cloud my words in white puffs, crunch snowdrifts underfoot. I retreat inside to steaming mugs of hot cocoa, fresh not frozen strawberries and orange sections slowly dipped in decadent dark chocolate, pretzels scooped in a fresh jar of Skippy, fresh fruit and flowers for the dinner table, fresh fish from the boat, the intoxicating scent of fresh bread. January brings me visions of adventures, freshened by exciting projects brimming with fresh words, always fresh words. Thank you.
January continues to be an adventure. Okay, the next three are Q, Imagine, and then Susan, and then if I missed, it's just the second Victoria. So Q, we're over to you. Got to turn your mic on.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome.
The poem I have for you is called On the Boardwalk. These dancers were on the boardwalk, the silver moon high in the night sky. Our dreams were entranced with every footstep that they took as the time flew by. These dancers always laughed a little with every pirouette that was made that day. Though the winds blew in a deep fury, they still decided to dance the night away. It wasn't until the night grew old and the crowd around them faded that their moves got weary and bones got tired, looking for another chance. For a moment to give this night more life, they saw us watching from a distance, and upon the rising sun, we watched them move and dance. Thank you.
Thank you, Q. Enjoyed the image, all those dancers. Okay, Susan, over to you.
Thank you. Coming to you from the Pacific Northwest and feeling just grateful to be in this community. My apologies if you were on Poetry Street last time. I read this poem, but I couldn't resist reading it again. This is called Flash Mobs. I spend the evening watching flash mobs in train stations, on basketball courts, multi-level shopping malls, dance, uptown funk you up, uptown funk you up, Ravel's Bolero in a train station in Barcelona, flutes and violins played by passers-by. We are the world. In a bookstore in Sweden, we are the people. We are the flash mob, beginning at the waterfront when one kid spins on his elbows and leaps up as others dance, funk you up. Drum sets march into the shopping mall and a singer announces, we will rock you. At IKEA, when salespeople at their stations start dancing, Mamma Mia, and shoppers drop their bags, they too dance like it's destiny. I am so happy we get to be human this way. Sing, dance, watch, smile, hold children on shoulders to see, a cell phone to capture this moment no one expected except the careful musicians who remembered their instruments. Oh, flash mobs, I am part of the moment too, even though it's years later on YouTube, and I am sitting in my library alone, watching Uptown Funk You Up. Don't believe me, just watch. Yes, there is joy in the world. Yes, there is love. Don't believe me, just watch. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. That I only heard that for the first time, but if it was the second time, I would have been grateful to hear it again. That was wonderful energy and just wonderful imagery. So, is there a second Victoria? In all due respect to the first Victoria, is there a second one? Sometimes when I try to scroll down all the names, I mistake. So if there's no second Victoria, then we'll go to Emily Sue, T, and then Mindy. So Emily Sue, over to you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is a wonderful day of poetry. I'm going to read one from my book called We Are Beach Glass. It's called Night Sky, since we're talking about the moon and the stars. I watched the rings of Saturn nearly touch the moon last night as the sky grew dark and cold. Curtain clouds had parted to reveal glowing lights traveling through galaxies, indifferent to our notice. The planets asked the stars to waltz to a tune I could barely imagine. I've watched strangers come that close on crowded city streets, unaware their orbits touching. This was no Arizona sky where stars crowd onto a limitless stage. No, New York nights, sparse by comparison, lights on the ground, inverse to the heavens. But even so, the astronomer on the radio had told an unseen audience where to look, what we'd see, the awe he kept to himself. I watched the rings of Saturn nearly touch the moon last night as the Milky Way took a bow. Applause rang out across the eons. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily Sue. Definitely keeping with our star, our looking at enjoying the stars. So, okay, T, over to you.
Morning, everyone, and sorry I've sort of faded in and out of it. I loved Dick's reading today, and I'm so excited to see the book and read the book, and yay, and some interesting readers. I'm new to the group, so yeah, good reading, good energy. My poem is my most recent one from Rattle, and Dick's familiar with it, and so here goes. Listen to your union workers. Tale of a UPS Teamster. I too have flown Southwest, scrambled for my window seat, bedraggled by long lines like herds of cattle, loved to travel, to watch storm clouds unwind in blue beyond the winglet, never knew the truth beneath those cow reviews. But now I do the math. I work for stockholders who've never done my job. Bolder men and women open folders. Numbers smolder facts, and I am one. Storms snarl flights and labor. I too labor, fight to tell my story. Overnight last week I tried to make sense of numbers. My trucks, 573992, gold stuck on her fender, mine on paychecks. She an object. She's an object I love. The ones who make money plotted to replace her with one that's bigger, clumsier. Their plan twisted in lines on maps. They've never seen my roads that wind narrow among redwoods and slopes. Late one night, as fog flowed in dark, I slowed. In dark, I slowed to let a car pass. Its lights soft haloed. Blind in beauty, I stopped close to the edge. The damp floor dropped among limbs, lost. Among limbs, lost to lists. My truck held me safe, sure. The car slipped by so close its mirror whiskered my bumper, disappeared in mist. In mist, I fear what might happen in another truck, less nimble, made for other terrain. My center manager chose to save her from the flatbed trailer assigned to take her. 992 is mine for now, the last of her design.
Thank you very much. And T, welcome to the group, and check out T's work on Rattle. Great. Okay, so Mindy, over to you.
Hi, Dick. Hi, Daniel, Richard, Dick. Thank you so much for your eloquent indignation and speaking for a lot of us. I find these very frustrating times. You'll have to forgive my voice. I'm a little under the weather, but I'm grateful to be here without being contagion and just the infectious spirit that you all impart, because this is wonderful stuff. This is called For Sale. And it's about a house that's across the street from us that's been empty essentially for 5 years, even in this crazy market. So I find it kind of sad. For sale. The sign on the property across the street is angled slightly, firmly pressed into the still green sod of November. The beaming face of a realtor bearing the good news, tilted toward passersby in a metallic nod and wind-shuddering wink. Each season, as we roll worn rubber hoses across the yard and pull at scruffy weeds that stink in the rain, yet bloom with fists of tiny white flowers, we wonder if the empty house, its windows wide and worried, the mailbox hollow and aching for a bundle of mail, will ever be filled with life again. Smoke rising from its chimney, flower pots lining the splintered steps, bikes scattered on the driveway, the music of new voices disappearing behind curtains rustled shut at night, dreams filling rooms that will harvest memories. Thank you.
Thank you, Mindy. Okay, I think we have gone through all of the people who I saw in the chat, but inevitably I missed somebody, and I'm mindful that Virginia Walker was with us, Kathy is with us, and Vivian Fisher, who I believe was responsible for the creation of the position of the Poet Laureate in Suffolk County. So always great when you're here, Vivian. Anyone who hasn't read who'd like to read?
Thank you.
Okay, I see Keith's, Vivian, I see Keith's hands up first. So Keith, we're going to go to you first.
Oh, I don't want to read. I was just saying thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for all you've done for poetry.
Thank you.
I just want to apologize. I'm having a problem with my video card. I've been here and encouraging you all on. So I don't know how my video is going to work here for the next few minutes, but after this, I guess I'm tearing a computer apart. So this is a one-page story about a different perspective. A fishy text message. Hi, Alexandra. Bruce here. Your beta fish, remember? Yep, the Siamese fighting fish with an attitude. I hope you're having a blast in the city. Pretty amazing that I learned how to text this to you, huh? Hey, do I have a fishtail for you? You know that guy who hangs around and bothers me when you're not around to bother me? Yeah, when I read your lips, it looks like you call him Dad, but under the water, it sounds like Dud. Well, Dud was here tonight doing the same thing he always does, bugging me. Does he tell you about that? I bet he doesn't. Did he tell you that he forces me to learn tricks before he'll feed me? The last time he fed me, he made me learn the Macarena, but I wasn't too good at it and he made me starve for a while. And when I learned it better, I added a special fish jiggle. Dad tried to copy it and he threw his back out. Ha ha, screw Dad. Tonight, he was pissing me off again, and I was kind of stressed anyway after you trashed my home and put in a new snail friend, as you call him, into my tank. So I didn't have much patience for Dud's food games. But did you know that betas have beta blocker saliva? And enough of that stuff in your eyes can really slow your heart down. So I spit in his eye, not once, but 7 times. He collapsed over my tank, but he was okay. He still had a mild heartbeat. I told him I was going to stop his heart if he didn't teach me how to text. He talks in words, so I pulled the phone out of his pocket and downloaded a translator app, and then we understood each other. Everything I said with bubbles, it converted to human words, and everything Dud said came out in fish bubbles. I recorded it in the Notes app so that I could copy and send it to you, just like you see it right now. That copy send thing, that's so cool. You got to get me one of these phones for my birthday. One thing I can say for you humans is you've got great technology. Anyway, when Dad recovered, he was really pissed since I'd also chewed off the tip of his nose. But don't worry, you don't have to rush home on my account. I'm pretty sure Dud won't be messing with me anymore. Every time he tries to retrieve the phone from the tank, I pretend I'm going to spit in his eye and he goes away. So after all, maybe you won't need to buy me that phone. Anyway, about 2 hours ago, I downloaded a top-rated game app, King of Crabs. My kind of game for sure. Dad'll see the bill on his credit card statement. I bet he never tells you about it. Here's what I copied from the store review. King of Crabs has you hit other crabs over the head in a bid to become the biggest crab. Battle up to 99 other players on the island as you climb up the ranks, collect new crabs, and customize them with items and weaponry. Wow, I really, really like this game. And this copy-paste thing is still freaking me out. You got to get this game. I'm already at level 7 and won an armored shell and a manta ray gun. And you'd be proud of me. I was just invited to join a team with a luminescent octopus, a giant swordfish, and a poison jellyfish. But I'm sorry to cut this short. We're about to kick a huge lobster's ass, and I need time to focus. We'll talk more about Dud later. Thank you.
I don't think I'll ever look at a fish tank the same way again. Good, thank you. Okay, let's check out the gallery here. And anyone else would like to read? I see Virginia Walker. Go ahead, Virginia, and I see Margaret. So let me put those names down. So Virginia and Margaret, and I always ask Kathy, and I'm going to ask Kathy as well. Okay, so Virginia.
I think my mic is now on. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I just want to thank Dick Westheimer for this wonderful reading. And I wondered, are the pictures in the book along with the poems? No, okay. Well, I really enjoyed the poetry. Thank you. And this is just a short little thing that I've found somewhere. A study in sepia. Sepia offers no extraneous blares of color or polemics of black. Sepia offers the patina of age, old lace on altar cloths and a doll's pantaloons, where the cuttlefish appears to have visited, ink the edges and screen the pursuers. The sailboat fixes purity, piercing the silent bay, so we believe none of us has been followed. We are alone in slow time, fading and conflagrating on the edge.
Thank you, Virginia. Always enjoy your work, and I love your background as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Margaret, over to you.
Hi, it's been a great night of poetry. Thank you, Dick, for your reading and your poetry with a cause. My poem is titled The Red Door. Dark wooden shingles of the 80s still hold your childhood home together. A cardinal metal sign reads, "Welcome," on the pathway up towards the steps, but you're not coming out or going inside. I mourn butterflies, ones my stomach once had in the 90s, miss the hoping I'd see you on a drive-by. Lost between this red door and the driveway are memories, cars you drove and skateboard turns your brother took. The bench on your front stoop sits empty, occupancy I saw a lifetime ago. I want to jar each memory like sticky notes to remember you and all your lost family by. Watch the scrolls of names float up on screen on the ends of movies now. Miss seeing and reading yours. Now I can only say it aloud inside my prayers. The realities of these sacrifices is all but a painted shade on your front door. Like my heart, it bleeds for yesterday.
Thank you, Margaret. Well done.
Thank you.
Kathy, over to you. Kathy Donnelly, there you go.
I'm here. I'm here. Just looking for my button to unmute. So I wanted to start by saying, Dick, I am bolted over by your poetry reading. I want to thank you for this theme of Ukraine because, you know, we're all living with it, but you brought it out to the surface again. To see it on the news, it's just devastating. And thank you for that. I need for you to text me the place you mentioned to donate. I also want to tell you, I think I'm more earth than moon. That was what you began with. And while I'm here, I'll just thank Dan and Richard for helping me put this together. It's all wonderful. I have a short poem, and it's in the perspective of the soldier who's asked to rise to this occasion and do the greater good for his own country, but will eventually learn the truth. And my prayer for Ukraine is that Putin goes too far, seems like he already has, and maybe Russia becomes a democracy instead of a dictatorship, a communism regime. And just much good comes for this as Germany has evolved after Hitler. Maybe good things come from horrible things. When it rains, it pours. When it rains, he looks to find the details, the reason every raindrop falls, its angle, slant, way of being in relation to it all, dropping in tandem, in disarray, ambivalent, unsure of falling at all. Unanswered questions in the rain falling. He stands very still, drowning in nothing he caused. So these soldiers go into these things, I think, very blindly, and some follow orders and are very destructive. Others bail. God bless them.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. Ed Goldman, did you want to read? I think Richard volunteered you to read.
Oh, yes, thank you. I figured I might as well chime in here. This is called The 100-Year-Old Man Wants to Land Already. We bank hard left, hard enough that if your ginger ale was not in your hand, it would surely land in your neighbor's lap. Then we level off and cruise straight until the next hard left, and the next. It's been a longer trip than most. We've been on our final approach for so long. The captain points out that there's only so much fuel in the tank, so at some point we'll be number one for landing. Falling the day before my 100th birthday was not ideal, Dad says, with a wry but resigned smile, ensconced in his hospice-issued hospital bed, able only to sip, nibble, and sleep. Why am I still here, he asks, more request than question. 6 weeks ago, Dad had only a few days to live, but all he knows is to put one foot in front of the other, so he has. Sliding his toes ahead a few inches at a time has gotten him pretty far. Though his feet won't carry him farther now, his body keeps going, and here we are in this holding pattern. The aide with the baby face holds the cup up to Dad's lips, and he sips a few drops of ginger ale, losing half down his shirt. He refuses the little package of snacks. Thanks.
Thanks, Ed. Very moving. Okay. All right, we're coming up right at the end. I think we've got everyone who wanted to read. Is there anyone else? I don't see any other hands. Kathy or Richard, do you see any other hands? Okay, so we'll bring
A hand
back.
right there, Daniel.
I'm sorry.
There's a hand right there.
Okay, who is this?
It's Bernardo.
Hey, Bernardo, you came in late, but we'll make room for you. Go ahead. You got time for one short one.
Thank you, brother. Crossing over. As we cross over into the new millennium, hymns from our ancestors press themselves against my persona. I hear trauma, drama, karma. I hear promises made, kept, broken, saved. They paved the way to this. Kisses planted love and trust, but some never knew it as such. Their need for touch distorted. Thwarted dreams beam darkness into hearts, but God did part the waters once before. Crossover. New shores embrace us to take us to new life. Keep looking towards the light. Our ancestors blessed us in the midst of their plight, and my prayers take the same path as theirs, murmurings in the noonday and the night. Cries and pleadings from bleeding spirits, and if you listen, you can hear it. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome, hum softly to my soul. That is the goal that all of us should rise. But our eyes inhibit flight, and fear and unbelief keep us from new heights. But fright is not born of faith. What does it take to free you from the stakes driven hard so long ago? Cross over. Come to know that you are stronger, smarter. Start the revolution. Follow love's evolution and evolve into this lover that you need. Feed upon the grains of wisdom you've been given. Knowledge put in motion, and oceans cannot hold us back. Oceans of injustice, oceans of time, oceans of ignorance, or however you define the distances involved. Solve equation, the summation yours to use. Dues paid lay wet upon the grass. Tears cleared passages that this time might come to pass. Come, cross over, lay down your burdens. Hurting others hurts us as well. Break the spell that binds you, that blinds you with your eyes wide open. When faith and love are acted upon, you won't always be left hoping. Bring new songs to sing, ring bells, beat drums, come, cross over, bring things to fruition. There is a generation waiting for you to cross over. Will you complete your mission? Ring, sing, bring, ring, sing, bring, ring, sing, bring, ring, sing, bring, swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming forth to carry me home. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone. It's good to see everybody. Happy New Year.
Bernardo, for joining us, and thank you for that beautiful moving poem. I'm reminded of the words of the prophet Amos, let justice roll down like rain. And thank you for reminding us of the Martin Luther King holiday coming up on Monday. Okay, so I think we're at the point now where, Dick, why don't we bring you back for an encore?
I found the unmute. I've also put a link to order the book for those of you. A number of folks have PM'd me to ask for the link in the chat, and there it is. And I'm going to put one more link in the chat, which was Daniel couldn't have me share a screen. I was going to play this. I've gotten a little bit into NFT poetry in preparation for the tomorrow's deadline entering Rattle's NFT poetry. And I'm posting a link to one of them in the chat. And sorry, that you can go see one of my NFTs if you're interested in seeing how that works.
So if you got your chat open, just go to the right-hand corner, scroll down to the bottom, and Dick's got two posts there. You can easily cut and paste that. Just copy it, you can paste it onto Word document anywhere that you want. Go ahead, Dick, sorry.
Okay, so just to prove that not all my poems are about Ukraine or space or even love for that matter, although this is a sort of love poem, and this is a news response. It's in response to the Club Q murders a couple months ago. It's called Club Q, Me and Steve. I don't go to gay bars, any bars really, except that time I went up to the corner dive. It had snowed 3 feet and I was out of smokes. The road was unplowed, so I walked a mile there and back. It was 5 below. I'd blown through my last cig, even salvaged stubbed out butts from the trash. So I trudged up to the hut, got a few stale packs of Luckies from the vending machine, and then bugged out. Even in a blizzard, that place was full of biker dudes, their colors stitched into their leathers, their arms tattooed. Hippie me was not gonna hang around. Oh, and I've been to a gay bar too. Back in '72 in NYC, my college buddy Steve wanted to show me the scene. He was the only gay guy I knew, and our little college town was not at all down with the life he knew. Steve guided me around the East Village streets till we came to the place. We walked in, and he transformed into a queen. He'd returned home from his own odyssey. The hugs were loud and too much for me, the kisses wet, and when he sat, he was so relaxed. A whole semester of holding himself straight let loose as he sagged into the tattered couch at the back of the tinsel room. Guys petted him and crooned like he was a lost pet come home. It was like the whole time I knew him, he'd been trudging like I did. Years later, hip deep in the snow, I cried. He knew why. I was seeing him whole, seeing his eyes light, his laugh lose the saw-toothed edge I'd come accustomed to. It was 1972, and there were few places a guy like Steve could go. And now it's 2022, and I sit at home, no longer craving a smoke. Doesn't snow much here anymore. The hut is gone. Steve is gone. It died in just one of the many horrible ways you might come to expect. And one more place he could have called home is just today, visited by gunfire and blood.
Thank you, Dick, for moving. Okay, this is the longest we've ever gone, and I think it's a tribute, Dick, to your wonderful poetry and commentary and the large attendance today and the number of people who wanted to read. So thank you for everyone for hanging out with us. Go ahead, Dick.
One more thing. I just loved the open mic. It was just so, it's hard to hang on to an hour and a half of poetry, and I appreciate those who hung on to the end, but it's so easy because the poetry was so great in the open mic. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for that. Thank you for everybody. And Dr. Bronson, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to call up get to the right place here. I'll call up the next little visual for you to introduce announce the next poet. Dr. Richard, over to you.
Well, first of all, thank you, Dick. I must say that this was a spectacular morning. Not only were the words themselves spectacular, but how they were spoken, and of course, the topic of Ukraine and the war. I noticed also, of course, the cover of your book is dominated by yellow and blue, the colors of the Ukraine flag. So thanks again. It was just really wonderful. So next month, and we're going to be having Claude Meyers, editor, writer, weekly of the Kauai newspaper. So news, Kauai, Hawaii, and the host of DJ interviewer in Santa Barbara, Southampton, a TV host, producer, director, podcast, poetry, and clearly someone who's multi-talented, and I look forward very much to being here on the next second Saturday and hearing Claude Meyers. Again, it was a wonderful today for the same reason Dick said. Not only was he spectacular, but the poems and the reading were just wonderful as well. I was so happy to be here.